Sometimes the most horrific stories aren't in some dramatic, grand tale. They're hidden in plain sight, buried in the most mundane places, like the dry, dusty pages of old record books. And this is one of those stories, an absolutely unbelievable and incredibly difficult one.
It all kicks off with this, just one desperate final sentence, scrawled in a Virginia plantation ledger back in 1857. This single line, written by the man at the center of it all, was the key that unlocked a secret so terrible he literally tried to burn it out of existence.
And this is the central mystery we're diving into. An old ledger, a business document that lists 18 children, all born to one enslaved woman, who's only ever called S. The notes inside are just cryptic and chilling. Things like light as cream or blue-eyed, past inspection. For decades, historians have been trying to piece this together, to figure out who this woman was and why someone went to such extreme lengths to erase her.
All right, so to really understand the crime, you have to understand the man behind it, Robert Hartley III. He was the heir to the Hartley plantation, and he found himself in some very desperate circumstances that pushed him to cook up a scheme that is just unthinkable. When you look at his life, there's this huge disconnect. Publicly, Robert Hartley looked like the perfect respectable planter, but behind closed doors, he was absolutely drowning. He had crippling gambling debts from his younger days, the price of tobacco was tanking, the financial pressure on him was just immense. And then a personal tragedy strikes, and it becomes the catalyst for this whole nightmare. After a really devastating miscarriage, his wife Margaret is told she can never have children. Now back then, this wasn't just a personal heartbreak, it was a financial disaster. No heir meant no long-term security, no easy access to loans. The whole future of the plantation was suddenly on very shaky ground.
So, what was his solution? It was a cold, calculated, four-step business plan. First, he chose a light-skinned enslaved woman named Sarah. Second, he kept her isolated in a remote cabin every time she was pregnant. Third, he used contacts in Richmond to sell the infants, who could pass as white, to rich families who couldn't have their own children. And maybe the most chilling part, he documented everything, every birth, every payment, in that secret ledger of his.
So you see, this wasn't just a one-time thing. This was a system, a horrifying system. Now let's really focus on the victim of this plan, Sarah, and the just staggering scale of what she was forced to endure.
Just look at this timeline. This represents a relentless 22-year cycle of forced pregnancy and birth. From 1835 all the way to 1856, Sarah's body was treated like a machine, forced to produce a child roughly every year and a half. The sheer amount of time this went on is almost impossible to wrap your head around. 18 children, born to one single woman and stolen from her every single time. Just let that number sink in for a second. 18 lives, created only for profit. And 18 moments of the most profound trauma imaginable.
And the cruelty of it all was so systematic. The records show that each baby was allowed to be with Sarah for just 3 days. That's just long enough for a bond to form, and then it was severed. Each child was a commodity, sold for up to $300. And you have to understand, at that time, that was more money than you could make from an entire acre of tobacco in a year.
A system built on something this profoundly cruel, well, it's unstable by its very nature. It's bound to collapse. And the end of Sarah's life really marked the beginning of the end for Robert Hartley's whole operation, and for the plantation itself. Here's the stark, brutal fact. In June of 1856, after 22 years of this horrific ordeal, Sarah's body just gave out. She died from complications right after giving birth to her 18th child. She was only 44 years old, and that tiny infant died just 3 days later. Now, look what happens immediately after her death. In the months that follow, the plantation is just hit with this wave of sabotage. Fires, broken tools, fences falling down. The enslaved community there had watched Sarah suffer for 2 decades. It really seems her death was the final straw. This wasn't some big organized rebellion. It was more like a quiet, steady resistance that just brought the whole operation grinding to a halt. So you've got to be wondering, how on earth do we even know any of this? This entire history was meant to be torched, completely erased, but it survived, somehow, preserved in 2 secret and totally contradictory documents that tell the exact same story from opposite ends of humanity.
On one hand, you have Robert's ledger, That's the crime documented by the person who did it. It's basically a business record, all cold, coded, dehumanizing language. But then, on the other hand, we have the secret diary of Rachel, the enslaved midwife. Hers is the crime witnessed. It's a moral record of suffering, and it's filled with empathy and human detail.
Listen to this. This is a direct quote from Rachel's diary. After the very first birth, she delivered all 18 of Sarah's children, and every single time a baby was taken, she risked her own life to write it down, to be a witness when nobody else would. God witnessed what I've seen. It's just an incredible testament to her courage. The fact that these two documents survived means we can know Sarah's story. But what do we do with that knowledge today? What does it really tell us about justice and memory and the unbearable truths that history can sometimes hold?
And get this, because this is maybe one of the most jarring parts of the whole story. The very ground where Sarah suffered and died, it's a shopping center now. There's a historical marker there, and it mentions the Hartley family and their plantation. But Sarah's name, her 18 children, her 2 decades of torment, not a single word. It's like it's been literally paved over.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? We have the proof, we have the ledger, we have the diary, we can document exactly what happened. But as one historian pointed out, that's not justice. And documentation is definitely not restitution. Knowing the truth of what happened can never ever undo the profound injustice that Sarah and her children went through.
So we're left with this one last haunting question. Sarah's story only survived by a total accident because the meticulous criminal kept a detailed record and a brave woman bore witness. And that forces you to ask how many other stories just like this one, just as horrific, were lost forever? How many other Sarahs were out there whose names and whose suffering were erased for good?